The head of Shihai First Academy stood before a gathering of enthusiastic students who had devoted themselves to mastering the intricate knowledge of the world's professions system over the last 3 years. This day marked a momentous occasion in their lives, as they found themselves at the edge of shaping their own destinies. It was a pivotal moment, where each of their professions would be determined, paving the way for their future endeavors. He chose to spare them from a prolonged speech and simply wished them all the best in following in the footsteps of their senior Su Qianqing, who had easily blazed the trail to become a pillar of the human race. Su Qianqing, Level 80 Holy Mage. Our protagonist Lin Moyu had spent countless lifetimes dreaming of this day. At long last, he would finally obtain his profession. Their world was very similar to any role-playing game. It possessed dungeons and secret areas. And above all else, the world was infested with monsters who roamed the wilds. Once you made it through the profession selection, an individual will be able to gain experience in all the usual ways. This would allow them to level up and enhance their skills, eventually increasing their overall strength. For generations, humanity had been on the verge of collapse until the mages of the world began carving away bastions of refuge, leading to the stability of the human race. It wasn't a secret among the student body that the most popular professions were the combat classes, followed closely by support classes. And pulling up the rear was the least popular category, the livelihood professions. Combat and support classes were divided into 5 major ranks. There was low, medium, high, rare, and legendary. The legendary rank was so rare that their entire city, Shihai City, hadn't produced one in nearly 10 years. As the head of the academy finished the incantation, the transmutation circle blazed to life. Gao Yan was fond of bombarding his classmate Lin Moyu with 21 questions, knowing that to this day he had rarely uttered a word. But regardless, he inquired about his classmate's desired profession. Gao knew he himself would make the perfect knight. With his physique, he would be able to protect all the girls. But he knew Moyu was different. He was ranked in the top 2 of his class. All his classmates resented the fact that he was sure to obtain one of the best professions. His unwillingness to talk hadn't endeared him to any of them. In fact, a lot of them resented him, leading to the rumors that while he was a genius, he was also an idiot. But Gao knew Moyu didn't talk because it was simply a waste of his time. The head of the academy had called in a favor, requesting an old friend stand witness to the ceremony. Zhang Qian, Level 52 Formation Master. Lin Moyu was shocked by the appearance of the old man. He was one of the few array masters to ever exist in their world. The principal wasted no time with the proceedings, calling forth the first student to enter the transmutation circle. And right out of the gates, a livelihood professional appeared. The first student of this session was chosen to be a farmer. While the young man was devastated, his classmates didn't believe it to be the worst choice. With time and persistence, he could rise to the lofty position of holy farmer. In continuing the trend, a chef was chosen. But this time the pupil was ecstatic, to be following in the footsteps of his father. The master wasn't impressed. This year's student body was showing signs of being average at best. He was hoping after countless years of duds, the academy would finally obtain a rare combat profession. But the principal wasn't holding out hope. Seeing as how their entire city only ever produced 1 or 2 rare classes each year. But things were about to change, as Xia Shui was one of the top 2 geniuses of her class. She was determined to finally put Lin Moyu in his place. He had an uncanny habit of always managing to best her, retaining his throne as the number 1 genius. But regardless, she would never admit defeat. The master saw potential in her the moment she stepped forward. He was sure she would become a mage. Her mental strength was double that of an ordinary person. If so, she would become the first high-level combat professional in the academy in many years. And if luck were on their side, she would become a special mage, which would place her in the realm of rare professions. As soon as her feet landed, the transmutation circle blazed to life. And a vision of fire and brimstone appeared before everyone's eyes. And as the master suspected, Xia Shui obtained a rare class. Combat class, Elemental Mage, rare profession. Her profession was one of the world's top powers. Upon reaching the divine level, she would have the capability of wiping out an entire city with a single spell. The school's head was impressed. She indeed deserved the reputation she had worked tirelessly to carve out. She wasted no time honoring her elders and their kind words. Before returning to the awaiting praise of her classmates, they were sure this time she had finally surpassed Lin Moyu. Moyu made his way forward, noticing the disdain of his fellow classmates. The academy head was shocked when his old friend insisted there was nothing special about the young man. Even so, the principal watched on, hoping this year their school would have not one but two rare specialists appear. The moment Lin Moyu stepped into the circle, a vision of horror descended upon the earth. A fierce storm kicked up with dark clouds spreading beyond the campus. This vision was unlike anything either of the elders had ever experienced. One had been waiting patiently for this moment since the day he took the reins as head of the academy. Xia Shui watched on as the clouds parted, 100% sure the sight before her eyes was firmly pushing her into second place once again. A vision of an undead army marched before their eyes, sending fear down even the class's second genius's spine, as she watched Lin Moyu stand there wrapped in a green aura of death. Combat class. Necromancer. Unique hidden profession. The distinction meant he was the only one of his kind in all the world. There would never be another until he was taken from this world. A unique hidden profession was so rare that it even surpassed the formidable legendary professions. His classmates were so shocked that they were losing their minds. Only a few acknowledged the greatness, while others were upset that the class bore had to be so lucky. While the hostility of the rest raised to the point that they wasted no time tarnishing his accomplishment. There were people in history who obtained hidden professions that turned out to be nothing special, while others still couldn't shake the fear and power they had just felt, causing them to make jokes to ease their worries. The uniqueness of his hidden profession was more than Lin Moyu could have hoped for. As he attempted to retreat to the safety of the crowd, the master pounced, halting his hasty retreat. As an array specialist, he had never witnessed such a unique profession before and demanded a demonstration. Name: Lin Moyu. Occupation: Necromancer. Unique. Level 1, 0%. Strength 10. Agility 10. Spirit 20. Physique 10. Equipment none. Summoning space 0 out of 10. Summon Skeleton Warrior. Level 1. Summon a Black Iron Skeleton Warrior. The ranking system went from Black Iron to Divine, with Black Iron being the weakest of the ranks. Soul Blaze. Level 1. Burn the target soul and deal burning damage. Power depends on your spiritual power and skill level. Seeing as how becoming a necromancer had improved his spiritual power, he was sure the class was a mage profession, even though his first skill was that of a summoning class. He obliged the master and summoned a skeleton warrior, costing him 10 spirit. A Black Iron Skeleton Warrior was summoned with stats of 15 across the board and 0 skills. The undead creature was a sight to behold. The master wasted no time antagonizing the creature with a warning shot across the shoulder. Skeleton Warrior has been attacked. Would you like to counterattack? If you don't make a choice within 10 seconds, an automatic counterattack will ensue. The skeleton was furious and ready to defend himself before the eyes of his lord. Lin Moyu quickly ordered his summon to stay put. The master couldn't believe his eyes. He was a level 52 professional. And the level 1 Lin Moyu's summon was hostile towards him, with nothing but average attributes. This display was a start, but Lin Moyu being level 1 hardly allowed him to grasp the strength of this new profession. Moyu returned to the crowd with his ominous skeleton soldier pulling up the rear. Gao Yang couldn't wait for the opportunity to touch the soldier. He was surprised at how sturdy the creature was and couldn't wait to see if it lived up to its persona. He rushed off, ensuring Moyu that he would return the moment he became a knight. Moyu used the moment of silence to examine his profession. Summoning space. 1 out of 10. Skeleton Warrior. Quantity 1. The space would allow him to store his summons and save spiritual energy. Such a little thing was a step toward him grasping a full understanding of his unique profession. The moment he realized the capacity would increase as he leveled up, left him shocked at how strong he possibly could become, causing him to realize that his fate would be the same as the necromancer he witnessed in his vision. One day he too would have the strength to take down a dragon in mere seconds. Just as he promised, Gao Yan had become a knight. Combat class: Sword and Shield Knight. Advanced profession. He insisted that one day the two would fight together, and he would stand in front of Lin Moyu, seizing the opportunity to coerce a response out of his silent classmate. Lin Moyu had gotten used to these antics and decided not to give his immature classmate the attention he was seeking. And as quickly as it started, the class change ceremony came to an end. With that, their time at Shihai First Academy was nearing its completion. The school would provide them with a week of training before they would be tested to see what institution of higher learning they would soon attend. The principal encouraged them to all take advantage of their newfound assets to the novice leveling dungeon during their week of training. The newbie dungeons were the perfect place for beginners. New professionals could gain the experience they needed before they stepped into the dangerous wilds. Xia Shui was nowhere near done. She was going to put it all on the line in order to gain the glory she sought. The final exams would likely be her last opportunity to compete. She challenged Lin Moyu, and to her surprise, he readily accepted. With this deal, she would be able to atone for the 3 years of losses she suffered at the hands of the school's #1 genius. Moyu stood in his living room, reminiscing over old memories. He was sure his grandmother would be proud of his accomplishments, and was determined to catch up with his sister and be admitted to the prestigious Xiajing Academy. A knock at his door pulled him back into reality. The head of the academy was there to personally deliver a duffel bag full of supplies. His eldest sister had made the principal promise to look after her younger brother before she would agree to attend Xiajing Academy. He was ordered to rest, as the principal expected him to enter the novice dungeon before the sun had fully risen in the sky. As soon as midnight hit, his system woke him from his sleep. Such a thing was unheard of. System loading. The host has awakened the necromancer profession. The profession meets the requirements of the strongest talent system, starting to extract the origin of the world. Optimization of skills has been completed. Congratulations to the host for awakening the unique God-level talent, Comprehensive. Comprehensive increased to level 1. All skill effects are increased by 5 times. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the passive skill. Damage transfer. Passive skill damage transfer increased to level 1. All damage received by the mage himself is taken by the summons. He wasted no time summoning forth his skeleton warrior. To his utter shock, the black iron skeleton warrior's stats had indeed increased by 5 times. Between his increased stats and his new passive skill, damage transfer, he was sure he was now essentially invincible. Moyu was being harassed by an annoying classmate outside the noob dungeon before the sun had fully risen into the sky. When asked to team up, he wasted no time gesturing that he wasn't interested. Gao Yang wasn't going to allow him to slide that easily. He insisted if Moyu didn't give him a proper explanation, the two would forever be tied at the hip. He wasted no time answering that in the noob dungeon, solo was the way to go. If Gao Yang had been paying attention in his lessons, he would know this. They have been told time and time again that up to level 10, solo is best, and to only look to form teams beyond level 10. But the principal stepped forward with this year's amended rules. Besides the class's top 2 geniuses, everyone was required to bring a support class into the dungeon. He explained that it wouldn't take them long to understand why support classes were necessities when entering a dungeon. Because Xiao Shui was aiming to enter Xiajing Academy, she was exempt because of her need to level up fast. And only because of Lin Moyu's unknown job, the school was leaving it up to him to decide whether he needed a support or not. Even though it wasn't like any of them would allow themselves to be dragged into the dungeon with the necromancer. When Lin Moyu revealed that he was also attempting to enter Xiajing Academy, the principal laid down the gauntlet. Getting into said academy wasn't something to be taken lightly. At minimum, you needed to be level 12. His own sister felt the need to reach level 16 before she attempted the entrance exam. Getting to level 12 in a week's time was a grueling task. But reaching the appropriate level was only the start, for once you begin your final trials, the requirements will shoot through the roof. Moyu didn't let any of the principal's words sway him. He had complete confidence in his ability. The look in his eyes made the principal believe he had exactly what it took. He hoped the hidden profession the kid had attained would give him the edge he needed to succeed. Xiao Shui was ready to hit the ground running. She wanted to compete to see who was the fastest. Moyu was only willing to take the challenge if she would lower her tone, just a little bit. He had no idea why she was so competitive. As he stepped through the portal, he hoped his deal would allow him to get some peace and quiet in the future. He wasted no time summoning the max amount of soldiers his spirit would allow. 4 skeleton soldiers along with the 2 from the night before sprinted away from him with orders to find and kill any monsters they came across. Successfully eliminated Big Ear Rabbit plus 10 experience. Level 1 1%. Successfully eliminated Big Ear Rabbit plus 10 experience. Successfully eliminated Big Ear Rabbit plus 10 experience. Within a few minutes, his progression to level 2 had increased by 10%. If things continued on this projection, it wouldn't be long before he leveled up. Things were going so well, he reached his first milestone of level 2 within 30 minutes of entering the dungeon. At level 2 all his stats had easily doubled. He was now capable of storing 20 skeletons. His active skill, Soul Blaze, had reached level 2 along with Summoned Skeleton Warrior. Moyu wasted no time adding 2 level 2 Undead Knights to his collection. With his passive skill, their stats were off the charts. But better than that, Moyu knew this was only the beginning. With 8 soldiers at his command, he was going to rip this dungeon apart. Successfully eliminated level 2 Grey Cat. Successfully eliminated level 3 Brown Dog. Successfully eliminated the level 4 Blue-Eyed Rat. The experience he gained from these kills flooded into him. As he leveled up, his class continued to astonish him. Every step his skeletons took formed a comprehensive map that he was easily able to keep track of. Lucky for him, his warriors weren't completely scouring the dungeon clean. Because of this, he too was able to put some work in. He blasted the Grey Cat stalking him with Soul Blaze. With his 5 times multiplier, the Black Cat was incinerated, leaving nothing behind but ashes. Even without his OP talent, Necromancer was easily on par with any other legendary class. And just like that, he had reached level 3 with 10% towards the next level. As a smile spread across his face, he happily summoned more skeleton warriors. At his current rate, monsters were falling in rapid succession. He had only burned up 4 hours of the 12-hour limit of the novice dungeon and had already reached level 4. The moment he dinged level 8, he was going to relocate to Shihai Suburbia to attempt to take out higher-level prey. The principal and Xiao Shui's father sat around discussing the milestone that needed to be reached by their highest-level students on the first day of dungeon diving. Reaching level 5 on the first day was the benchmark. If a student couldn't reach that, their chances of getting into the prestigious academy were severely diminished. As long as Moyu was within 500 meters of his warriors, he could simply sit back and allow the experience to stack up. He was starting to worry that the level 8 mobs weren't going to show. After spending 7 hours in the dungeon, he was hoping that at least the dungeon's top monsters would put up a challenge. As Moyu and his mini-legion progressed deeper into the dungeon, a branch swatted him across the chest, activating the passive skill damage transfer. He climbed to his feet impressed by the attack, as he stared up at the bullwhip tree, his first level 8 opponent. The tree was in hibernation most of the time, but came alive to attack any living creature passing by. The giant tree would be an appropriate target to test out his skeleton warriors' bloated stats. They currently sit at around 275. He was thankful that the tree was capable of withstanding their attacks instead of instantly dying like he had come to expect from the monsters of this dungeon. The 4 slashes that it took to defeat the monster tree wouldn't diminish his returns in the least, seeing as how this forest seemed to have been made especially for him. His soldiers rushed in, essentially becoming woodcutters as they busted their way through the forest. And not long after he started, he found the exit to the dungeon neatly tucked away behind the dangerous forest. The elders were all in shock. They stood around as student was seen casually exiting the portal. There must have been an accident, as the chances of a student clearing the level 8 forest was impossible. In the span of 10 hours, Moyu had cleared out the dungeon, leaving him stuck at level 7. The principal stood there, not believing his eyes as Moyu asked for permission to transfer to Shihai Suburbia. The abilities of a necromancer had to be outstanding, as this was the first time he had ever heard of someone clearing the dungeon completely. And in only 10 hours to boot. He decided he had no reason not to permit the transfer. Moyu was advised to rest up while the other students wrapped things up. As the principal returned to his group, the look on his face caused the others to worry. But as soon as his hand wrapped around his drink, a smile spread across his face. He explained that their top student had slaughtered his way through the dungeon in under 10 hours. The adults stood around remarking that even a legendary profession would have a hard time achieving such results. Xiao Shui's father was sure his daughter was going to have a hard time coming to terms with this news, only to have the principal inform him that by now, she should be used to it. Since the day she stepped into this academy, she had been second best to the academy's first genius, Lin Moyu. Moyu sat back meditating on his progress. He had managed to summon 24 warriors, lagging far behind his capacity of storage. At this rate, it was going to take him some time to cap out if he wasn't able to gain some other form of boost. Xiao Shui exited the portal, light as a feather. She had matched the standard of all the best clears of the novice dungeon. The level 5 elemental mage was only interested in the results of one other. She was thrown for a loop to find him sitting on a rock meditating, only for everything to come crashing down as she noticed his level. Her father called her over. She was in such shock, his appearance hardly fazed her. As she sulked in the car, her father informed her that Lin Moyu had cleared the dungeon in only 10 hours. She instantly understood that if he hadn't run into such a bottleneck, he would have most likely progressed to level 8. Gao Yang instantly upgraded his classmate's title to Boss Lin, insisting he be allowed to accompany him on his next dungeon dive. To his complete surprise, Moyu agreed. With that all set, he promised to be waiting at the entrance of the school bright and early. He wondered what was taking his boss so long, only to be informed by the principal that Lin Moyu was on his way to Shihai Suburbia. He couldn't believe Lin Moyu was capable of such a dirty trick. The principal recommended he move on as he would never succeed. The walls of the Xinxia Empire were constructed to protect the citizens from the dangers of the wilds. Moyu had been given the credentials to bypass the walls to head into the wilds. Before he passed through the walls, he checked on the mission board to see if there were any suitable missions for his journey. The first was a simple collection quest: green sprout grass, black wolf skin, and beast bones. These 3 items would fetch a decent price with unlimited quantities accepted. But the next mission was more his style, even if it was out of his range at the moment. Mission: raid the level 14 domain of Shihai Mines and acquire domain boss, King Goblin's Core. But the only problem was the domain boss would only drop on nightmare difficulty and above. The mission reward was an astounding 10,000 gold. Domains were categorized into 3 difficulties: normal, nightmare, and hell. The normal difficulty was more suitable for a solo like him. Nightmare difficulty upped the ante, requiring a strong team to proceed. And the hell difficulty was reserved for elite professionals only. The gate guard was surprised to see a level 7 attempting to exit the city. But seeing as how all the credentials were in order, he didn't buck the system. He only advised the young student to return immediately if his life was in danger. His life was the most important thing, and he needed to protect it at all costs. The moment Moyu stepped through the walls was akin to being transported to another planet. The stench of stale blood lingered in the air, and beasts could be heard off in the distance. Within the sight of the walls, a goblin attempted to ambush him. But with the stats it possessed, a single soldier could handle the level 10 beast. With each level, his soldiers were growing by leaps and bounds. His skeleton warrior's stats currently sat at 375. The goblin's eyes grew wide as it attacked its overpowered foe. A single attack was all that was needed to spill its blood. The experience gained was enough for Moyu to order his soldiers to begin a goblin hunt. He had no idea how his sister managed to hit level 16. But if his luck held out, he was sure he could at least come close. If he had his way, the two would be reunited in short order. Moyu's stats had pretty much increased at the same rate. With each level they increased by 10, they all were a solid 100 except for the outlier stat Spirit, which at level 10 was currently sitting at 300 points. At level 10, the stat had jumped by over 120 points. Hitting level 10 had other surprises. As his talent, Skeleton Warrior had increased to Bronze Skeleton Warrior level 10. Each of their stats had reached 1500. And at long last, his Undead Warriors had gained a skill. Rage. When in use, boost damage by 200% of current strength. His newly reinforced skeletons were sure to lay waste to this entire area. Before he knew it, the area had been completely cleared. Moyu sensed an incoming attack. Without the time needed to dodge, he took an arrow to the shoulder, causing the damage to reverberate through his skeleton warriors. At that very moment, his eyes crossed with what he could only assume was an assassin. He was sure his attacker was of the archer profession. As he allowed the assassin to sprint by, the ones responsible for the arrow protruding from his body came into view. The two had the nerve to inquire about the whereabouts of the assassin, totally ignoring the arrow which had been lodged into his shoulder. The archer realized his mistake and immediately apologized, surprised by the lack of damage his attack had caused. Moyu accepted the apology, but he wouldn't be lenient if it ever happened again. The archer's companion had been paralyzed by the sight of the undead warrior. Sitting on his high horse, he decided that if Moyu wasn't a criminal, he would be one day. For anyone who associated with the undead had an obvious dark mentality. His companion quickly called him off, as this was neither the time nor the place. The two returned the way they came. Moyu couldn't help but antagonize them as they went. If they had chosen to fight, he wouldn't have hesitated to put them down. Reaching level 10 also had its cons. The experience needed to level up was 3 times the amount. At its current rate, he would have to kill nearly 5,000 goblins to reach level 11. If he wanted to get into the academy, he would have to stop standing around and join in on the action. With his direct intervention, things improved. If he continued, he would make it to level 15 a day before he needed to return. He had no idea how his sister accomplished such a daunting task. There had to be a better way. He needed to figure out the secret she had used to obtain such amazing results. He was most definitely missing something. As he searched through his memories, all that came to mind was the battered and bruised state he remembered from the night she returned. She had to have entered the nightmare difficulty of the Shihai mines. Was his sister really capable of accomplishing such a task? He decided to take the chance and head there as soon as the sun rose. His skeleton warrior alerted him that company was approaching. What was the chance that someone else was also leveling in the dead of the night? The girl in all black from earlier wasted no time imposing herself upon him. But luckily, all she wanted was food. He had no problems furnishing her with what he could, passing her the meager fare of a cooked potato, which she hurriedly began to scarf down. She was in such a state that even the hot potato wouldn't deter her from feasting. His bottle of water was all she needed to overcome the inconvenience. Moyu was in his usual mood as the young lady inquired about his name and thanked him for the meal. She had no problems with his silence, offering instead a simple exchange of knowledge. The simple analytic skill would pass more knowledge than either of them needed to attain. To his surprise, the skill failed and he obtained 0 information. He didn't mind too much, as her smile did more than enough to put him at ease. His name was Lin Moyu, he was level 10, and his occupation was of the unheard-of class, Necromancer. She recalled seeing an extremely rare undead summon standing next to him the first time their paths crossed. She had no idea why he was refraining from speaking. She doubted he was a mute as he didn't have the look about him. Moyu simply replied, "Why?" The supposed assassin was pleased that he could talk, only to receive another why. She quickly figured out that his whys were in relation to the reason he didn't receive her analytic information. She revealed a blocking badge, an item used to ensure your privacy from anyone that wasn't 10 levels higher than you. To be fair, she deactivated the item to allow him to learn more about herself. Her name was Ningyi. She was a level 19 shadow assassin. The very moment the shadow assassin became aware of their presence, his skeleton warrior had already informed him of the 3 incoming hostiles. The size of the group had increased as they approached from 3 different directions. Ningyi couldn't believe the stubbornness of the 3 trackers. She sensed danger while attempting to say her goodbyes. As she stepped out of the path of an incoming arrow, it exploded, marking both of the campfire acquaintances. The marking arrow was definitely going to be an inconvenience. The arrows were specially made to counteract an assassin's invisibility skill. The group wasn't taking any chances. The leader's suspicions that the 2 were a team was all but confirmed. A disgusting assassin and a dark summoner were bound to be allies. Ningyi assured the group that Moyu had nothing to do with this. And for his safety, she offered up the treasure they were after. But things had progressed farther than that. The only way out of this situation was by death. There was no way she was going to get a fresh level 10 slaughtered because of her miss. She ordered him to run the moment she began her distraction. She gave him a sly smile and reassured him that she was the shadow assassin and the night was where she played. But he doubted that was the case, as she wouldn't be in this situation if her skills were as good as she implied. And with the mark above her head, even a blind man could spot her a mile away. The group was done talking. Above all else, the leader wanted the Necromancer 6 feet under. He cast illumination to increase the range of his ability, and to ensure the assassin had no chance of slipping away. Ningyi had no choice but to deal with this problem head-on. The 3 jerks prepared their opening attack with no intent of showing any mercy. Moyu also wasn't going to take any chances. Being surrounded as he was, he wasted no time calling forth his soldiers. The sight of the disgusting creatures only set the leader off further. He let loose a level 20 fire spell as Ningyi insisted Lin Moyu run. Even if he wanted, he wouldn't be able to move as the team had taken every precaution to secure their enemy. The 3 weren't playing around as they rudely opened with finishing moves. Ningyi couldn't believe she was going to get such an innocent guy killed. Doing everything she could to protect him, she forced him out of the path of the arrows, but unfortunately into the path of the fire. To her surprise, the incoming attacks were easily countered by the appearance of undead soldiers. One stepped into the path of the fire, eating its damage as another allowed the arrows to harmlessly collide with his great sword. The skeleton warriors wasted no time pushing forward. The 3 professionals were in for a surprise. The undead warriors had no reason to show their opponents any mercy. As the dual-wielding soldier marched towards him, the leader had no idea how this was possible. The level 10 Necromancer should be dead. There was no way he should have been able to withstand an attack for someone double his level. It didn't take long for the 3 to realize that the stats on these undead creatures were through the roof. The 3 stood in shock as they realized the full force that had been arrayed against them. The undead soldiers surrounded their prey, making sure they realized they had chosen the wrong enemy. Even though Ningyi knew this army belonged to the Necromancer, she had a hard time believing it was real. It was entirely too much. The sight caused her to be the one who was only capable of saying a single word. Moyu had managed to increase his soldier count to 44 out of a possible 100. His talent comprehensive increase had reached level 2. Comprehensive increase. All skill effects increase by 10 times. The leader panicked, casting a shield to protect himself from the horrors that surrounded him. The action only caused them to attack. The great sword wielders dashed forward, shattering the shield on contact, causing the mage to lash out, with the intent to show them his true power. The undead warriors brushed off the attack and finished the job once and for all. The archer, witnessing his friend's demise, decided it was time to retreat. But regardless of his actions, he couldn't shake the skeletons. His high agility meant nothing to these creatures as their agility stats surpassed the archer by 500 points. Surrounded by skeletons that were easily able to keep up, meant his chances of escaping were nearly impossible. Moyu was surprised that the knight had the ability to use invincible. As long as the bubble surrounded him, he was immune to 100% damage. The skill allowed him to withstand the attacks of a level 40 mage. The difference between a knight with and without the skill invincible was night and day. If the knight had known such a fearsome foe would show up, he wouldn't have imposed himself in the assassin's business over an intermediate skill scroll. Moyu chose to go all in. Since he had already killed, he had no choice but to clean up the rest. He ordered his soldiers to use their rage skills. Berserk Strike. Berserk Strike inflicts 200% of user's own strength on the target. Strength 1500. With each intense attack, the uptime of the ability was shortened. And within moments, the knight was gruesomely sent from this world. The words of his sister echoed in his head. Moyu, when you decide to pursue something, fully commit to it without hesitation. Ningyi couldn't believe that Moyu had destroyed their enemies without lifting a finger. They wasted no time sorting through the spoils that dropped from the enemy's storage spaces. All of the loot was bronze rank and were drops from Carmen's Orc Legion, a level 20 dungeon outside of Shanghai City. The gear was useless. Moyu stored them to be sold later. But among the trash was a very valuable primary skill scroll. Primary skills scroll. Can attain skills below level 20, possibility of obtaining previously acquired skills. She encouraged him to use it. At his level, primary skills were invaluable. The fact that she was encouraging him to toss away 10,000 gold gave him insight into her background. Moyu could tell choosing not to use it would only create a ruckus. And he just wasn't interested in throwing his piece out the window at the moment. The scroll activated the moment he injected spiritual energy into it. Acquired skill. Corpse Explosion. At level 1 of Corpse Explosion, corpses in your vicinity will detonate, inflicting 10% damage to enemies within a 1-meter range. Necromancers drew vitality from the fallen bodies strewn across the battleground. Despite the seemingly modest potential of this skill, when considering Moyu's talent, its blast radius expands to 10 meters upon enhancement. Moreover, a single exploded corpse has the power to trigger a cascading chain reaction among the deceased. This ability stands as an ultimate AoE skill. Because of one OP talent, all his skills would be off the charts. Moyu couldn't place why it was a pleasure to be around Ningyi. She was nothing like the girls he knew from his academy. Hearing that she enjoyed hearing his voice only made him want to talk a bit more. To his surprise, her voice didn't bother him as much as others. Ningyi blushed at the compliment, even if it was a sideways compliment. She presented him with a small token of appreciation for saving her life. Intermediate Skill Scroll. You can obtain skills between level 40 and level 70. There's a possibility of obtaining previously acquired skills. The item was extremely valuable, worth at least 1 million gold coins. Her actions made no sense. She had allowed herself to be chased halfway across the continent for the very item she was now giving away. Ningyi sought warmth by the crackling fire while recounting the events that led to her recent misfortunes. Deep within the confines of Carmen's dungeon, nestled near Shanghai City, she stumbled upon a concealed chest. These enigmatic chests manifested at random, and through sheer luck, she chanced upon one. Within its confines lay an intermediate skill scroll. Unbeknownst to her, a group of thieving scoundrels had been observing her every move. Despite the scroll's limited value, they coveted it and sought to seize it from her. How could she simply surrender something she had rightfully discovered? Thus, for 2 arduous days, they relentlessly pursued her, clinging to her like persistent pests, no matter what measures she took to elude them. Moyu didn't understand why she had risked her life for something she hardly valued. She laughed, assuring him that she was never at risk. If they happened to have forced her into a critical state, she would have been automatically teleported away. But if it wasn't for him, she would have seriously gotten hurt. The pain wasn't something she enjoyed experiencing. Here he was worried for a young lady whose family had made sure she had all the protections she needed. At the sight of food, she immediately requested it be handed over. Seeing as how he was obviously here to farm, she knew he was preparing to enter a university. She was impressed when he informed her he was shooting for Xiajing University. With his skills, he should be able to get in easily. She had never come across a level 10 who could easily take out level 20 professionals. If they rejected him, no one had a chance. She informed him if he made it into the university, he had to be prepared when he entered Xinxia Tower. The first clear gave double rewards, so he had to climb as high as possible on his first try. If he accomplished this, he would attain a lot of points, and in Xiajing, points were the equivalent of gold. She continued her rant until she passed out next to the fire. Moyu kept watch through the night, meditating to regain his spiritual energy. Early the next morning, she awoke hungry and demanded his potatoes. She wasn't just interested in a few, she wanted them all. If he was a real man, he wouldn't have a problem relinquishing them all to her. After acquiring all his food, she rose to her feet, pausing briefly to notify him of her expectations of him raising his level quickly, envisioning their imminent partnership. As she dashed away, clutching the bundle of potatoes in her arms, she called out that they would level up together during their next encounter. Now that she was gone, it was time for him to clean up the mess while trying out his new skill. Moyu cast Corpse Explosion. The effect was astonishing, leaving behind a crater and destroying part of the forest. The ability was unstoppable. For all intents and purposes, it was essentially a divine skill. Strategically, if the ability was activated while the corpse was in the air, the effects would be devastating. Moyu intended to use the skill in the Shihai Mine dungeon. Now that the skeleton soldiers cost 70 spirit points to summon, he was only able to summon 4 warriors. Summoning space, 48 out of 100. Skeleton warriors, 48. With the current strength of his soldiers, he was in no rush. Sooner or later his space would become full. It wasn't long before he crested an embankment that led to the Shihai mine. The encampment was very active with people attempting to form parties for both normal and nightmare difficulties. There was a place for everyone. Moyu ignored the attention that his skeleton soldier was attracting. This dungeon was a tricky one. It didn't have a hell difficulty, but the normal difficulty included elite monsters, who became enhanced elite monsters when attempting the nightmare difficulty. The normal difficulty alone required a tank, a healer, and a damage dealer. But when attempting the nightmare difficulty, you needed a full party of 5, 2 supports, 2 damage dealers, and the tank. A professional attempted to use a dousing ability on Moyu. Due to having a shielding badge, the detection technique has failed. Ningyi had insisted he take her badge, as the title Necromancer would continue to cause him problems wherever he went. But thanks to her, he was now being harassed by hordes of people intent on having him join their party. He even got invited to an elite group intending to raid the nightmare difficulty, but regardless, he turned them all down. Please confirm that you've selected nightmare difficulty. He had no need for teammates when his intent was to solo the hardest difficulty. His actions caused a stare when people realized he had entered alone. The onlookers were intent on seeing if he returned alive. The smell of blood intensified upon entering the dungeon. The moment he stepped foot out of the protective circle, the show would begin. The goblin was an enhanced elite master. Everything about it was improved over the normal creatures he destroyed in the open world. Normal professionals wouldn't have a chance against such creatures without forming an experienced party. But his soldiers wouldn't have such problems. Their attributes were far superior to anything that would be found in this mine. He and his soldiers moved out, ready to lay waste to whatever they came across. His group massacred the goblins one after the other. The experience he gained was 10 times that of the monsters of the same level. The dungeon was everything he hoped for as he ordered his soldiers to continue the slaughter. His leveling speed was going to shoot through the roof. As his map formed before his eyes, he decided not to leave a single goblin alive. As the experience came in and the loot stacked up, it wasn't long before he dinged the next level. What would have taken him a full day's work outside only required 5 minutes' time inside the dungeon. And with that, 4 more warriors were added to his army, bringing him to a grand total of 56 undead skeletons. The most important upgrade he received from moving into double digits was the fact that his attributes were now doubled. His core stats would now increase by 20 for each new level, while his spirit would jump by 100 every time he leveled up. He hoped it would all balance out as the cost of everything was sure to skyrocket. His skeleton warriors also saw a boost to their already bloated stats. With each level up, they would be gaining plus 200 points to their stats. There was one question he had no way of gaining the answer to. His newest skill, Corpse Explosion, had remained at level 1. He was sure she would have the answers if she was still around. His soldiers completed the area with 32% towards his next level. The moment the area was clear, a fearsome foe made its presence known. Wolf King. Elite Leader. Level 15. Strength 2000. Agility 2000. Spirit 1000. Constitution 2500. Skill Roar. The boost to the leader's skills could give his skeletons a run for their money. His warriors were waiting for the order and wasted no time charging in. The wolf opened up with a roar, sending the first wave of attackers flying backward. So, Moyu ordered his army to use their skills in turn. He watched on as his soldiers struggled with the wolf. He was sure his soldiers fighting a much stronger foe was going to advance each of them by leaps and bounds. While the roar ability didn't have much kick, it did wonders to give the wolf room to work. The moment the boss had room to move, he fled. He couldn't believe his eyes. A dungeon boss was actually retreating. The moment he sensed the danger, he ordered his soldiers to fall back. While the wolves weren't anything special, they had numbers. Even if he grouped his soldiers up, there was still no chance that they could cope with such an onslaught. As a necromancer, there was no way he would retreat. All of their experience belonged to him. He ordered a single soldier forward to get the ball rolling. Level 14 Mining Wolf killed. Experience 2800, obtained 3 wolf hides. The moment it was down, he cast Corpse Explosion. With his talent's enhancement, the damage would easily reduce the wolf's health to 0. With instant kill after instant kill, the experience flooded in, taking Moyu from 32% to 72%. Seeing as how he liked to keep things fair, he made sure the boss tasted some as well. The experience he gained from the boss left much to be desired. Its only saving grace was it made up for it with its loot drops. The group pushed forward seeking the true boss of this dungeon. Moyu couldn't wait to gain access to a dungeon with a held difficulty. Soloing in such a place was sure to provide him with the experience he was looking for. With his current rate of leveling, and if things continued as they were, there was a good chance that he would reach level 19 before he had to return to the academy. The Goblin King should give him exactly what he needed to pass over into level 12. Goblin King. Monster Leader. Level 16. Strength 3000. Agility 1500. Spirit 1500. Constitution 3000. Skills: Fire, Breath, Sweep, and Tremor. They had finally run into a boss who outmatched their stats and constitution. The Goblin King went from sleeping to attempting to decide this battle in a single blow. If it wasn't for his damage transfer, he would have been destroyed. But instead, 2 of his skeleton warriors drifted off into the abyss. His attributes were just too low for such a behemoth. As it stood, he was the weakest link in his army. It was time for him to stop standing around watching and do his best to increase his own attributes. The skeleton warriors and the Goblin King were on similar footing, where his stats leaned more towards strength and constitution. The skeletons had a balanced stat set. As it stood, his only saving grace was the fact that he had an army of them. If things continued as they were, his skeleton army would crush the Goblin King. To get the creatures off his back, the boss used Shockwave. The skill put the Wolf King's roar to shame. It sent all his undead creatures flying backward with tremendous force. The goblin followed the attack up with Fire Breath, instantly cutting through the health of all skeletons that it came in contact with. Before Moyu could lose his army, he ordered them to return to his summoning space. He made his way into the battle with a soul blast to the Goblin King's eyes. The attack did the trick, interrupting the Fire Breath, and giving his remaining skeletons room to maneuver. Low on spirit, he had no choice but to finish this now. He gave the order to his soldiers to bring this battle to a close. Before the Goblin King's body could hit the ground, he shouted with triumph, as he had obtained the Goblin King's core, and had managed to reach level 12. Moyu couldn't be more pleased to level up and have his spirit replenished after having it depleted in the battle. Before exiting, he equipped the Wisdom Robes even though he didn't get much use of its main ability to reduce cooldowns by 5%. But the spirit and physique boost of 10 was enough to make it at least useful. The Goblin King core, which was worth at least 10,000 gold, could easily buy 2 pieces of equipment. Being able to keep all of the loot was a pure perk of being solo. And just like always, he used his spirit to bring his warrior count up to 60. With everything taken care of, he said the words needed to leave the dungeon. Return. A crowd formed as he exited. They couldn't believe their eyes. He was wearing the Wisdom Robes. None of them had any faith he would return alive, let alone solo defeat the boss of the dungeon. Now that Moyu had gotten a taste of the dungeon experience, he had no interest in killing simple trash mobs. He would use his 12-hour cooldown to meditate before re-entering the dungeon for round 2. The recent expedition into the dungeon proved incredibly fruitful on multiple fronts. Notably, he discovered his most significant vulnerability, while also gaining a deeper understanding of how his various skills complemented each other. Among these abilities, the corpse explosion stood out as an unstoppable force when utilized with precision. On the other hand, Soul Blast not only served as a reliable means of interruption but also possessed the unique ability to bypass the enemy's defenses. Few bosses, if any, could endure the potent effects of this skill. 12 hours passed, allowing him to add more soldiers to his army. As he made his way back to the dungeon's entrance, he admired the number of people who spent their time camped out in the wilderness. Thinking about the amount of experience they must collectively have, only brought his mind back to a certain individual. A commotion up ahead put a halt to his progress. The Dynasty Guild had taken it upon themselves to occupy the dungeon. Their guild leader was completing a task, and until he was done, no one would be allowed to enter. The group didn't take kindly to a certain professional continuing to run his mouth. And without warning, the head member blasted him with a fire spell. The spell was powerful enough to lay the individual down for good. Before the crowd could get out of control, they made sure everyone knew that he wouldn't be alone if anyone else dared defy them. If anyone wished to take revenge, they would welcome them with open arms. The simple gist of the situation was the Dynasty Guild was after the core of the Goblin King. It only dropped in nightmare difficulty and appeared once every 100 days. And today would mark the 100th day since his last drop. Because of that, the group was making their move. They intended on holding up the dungeon until they obtained the core. The task in the city to obtain the core was made by none other than this guild. The group was undercutting the cost of the core by 3 times. Only a fool would sell it to them for 10,000 when it was worth 30,000. It was an awful coincidence that the core had fallen right into Moyu's lap. The core was a key component in the Goblin King's ring. All stats increased by 10. And skills increased by 1. It could be equipped at level 15 and was the strongest accessory up to level 40. To a beginner, such a ring was simply overpowered. The rumor is that the Dynasty Guild's leader has his sights on attending Xiajing Academy. They have everything they need to craft the ring. All they're missing is the Goblin King's core. Moyu was done with this commotion. He needed to get back to work immediately. He marched forward, ignoring the warnings thrown his way. The group had no respect as they were defiling the dead man's corpse. Upon seeing his approach, they asked him if he was also looking for death. He replied for them to get lost as their group was blocking his way. This set the mage off. He had no intent on taking what the little shit was putting down. Moyu repeated himself. Get lost. The mage's scan succeeded. Lin Moyu, level 12 Necromancer. A level 12 had no reason to be here, and definitely no reason to enter the dungeon. He had never heard of the profession Necromancer, but could care less. The onlookers did the best they could to make Moyu stand down. The mage sensed the kid wasn't one to mess around with. But instead of listening to his instincts, he threatened if the kid took another step toward them, he would be put down. Moyu immediately made his intent known, taking the steps needed to begin the battle. The Mage's Guild members encouraged him to do it. But instead of attacking, the level 25 mage surrounded himself with a shield, giving the rookie free rein to attack him. Moyu gave his soldier the order to dispose of anything in its way. The shield should have been able to take 5 blows from a professional of level 25. Instead, the summon's single blow was all that was needed. Casting Rage Strike, the undead soldier intended to finish this before it got out of hand. The mage saw his demise and cast Fire Repulsion Ring to save his life, sending both of them flying backward. His guild member stood around, baffled, forcing him to give them the order to attack. His summon wasted no time dealing with the knight that dared stand in his path. Their only chance of handling this situation was to take out the summoner himself. The mage called down the full might of the Dynasty Guild upon Moyu's head. Anyone who dared challenge them should understand that their death was near. Multiple arrows raced in Moyu's direction as onlookers called for him to dodge the attack. Instead, he called out his soldiers, who easily dealt with the attack, to the shock of the archers. The group had no idea he could summon more than one skeleton soldier. The mage had no choice. He needed the others to buy him the time needed to cast his top spell. Fire Serpent Dance was an exclusive skill of a level 20 mage. Only 1 in 3 mages was even capable of learning the skill. Moyu wasn't bothered by the Fire Serpent, casually walking forward as if nothing had happened. At that moment, the mage knew they had chosen the wrong enemy. From the blaze of the fire, a horde of undead soldiers rushed forward, easily exceeding the number of the Dynasty Guild members. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you support the original creators. Supporting their work will allow us to continue to get amazing chapters in the series. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.